And we also did digital photos every year because it's easy for a young kid to understand. I got up to where I was teaching 7 days a week, all these different classes going on. And I just loved doing it. I would write my curriculum for the day. I would write my course in handouts in the morning and have them printing on a whole bunch of color printers as the students arrived and package them up. And I had a cute little trick. I would just read off my handout and do things on a projector, and then I'd pass out the handout. It looked exactly like what I had just done. And I even backed the computers up and started to do it. I found one thing. I found that the kids, it was so fun to be a part of the kids. I was a friend to them. They could talk to me about the things you can't talk to your parents about. And we always made the class that kind of fun. I brought in a lot of entertaining programs, the ones that had little guys running across the screen, the ones where you could send signals that caused big dinosaurs to pop up on someone else's computer. And so I involved that in along with the serious productive work. And sometimes the kids taught me things. Like one day, this one little kid was using a program called ClarisWorks, and he said, "Oh, I made a little arrow go across the screen." I said, "You can't make it move in that program." He says, "I did it." Little John Crawford, he was an ADD student too. I went over and looked, and there on his screen, this red arrow's moving across the screen. So I learned his trick. He taught me, you might say. And it was another one was the best day of class we ever had in networking. I taught the kids how network wires worked, how little packets of data went along from computer to computer and found their way to the right place. And they had to go up on blackboards and draw curves for all this stuff. Well, we used a server at first. So you go onto the class server and you could download all the software you needed if you lost any. Or if there was some new software for today's lesson, you could download it off of a server. And they loved seeing the classroom server, Steve's server, and a few other servers we had in the building. And then the day that I taught them how to be a server was probably the most exciting day of their life. This is the day that my name's going to be up there. Sandy's computer, Sandy's server, whatever, John's server. And they got so excited at that. But now I had to teach them how to protect your data. And I taught them, but I made a rule that if anyone in the class can get onto their computer, they can mess up anything they want to as long as it can be undone. That was the rule. And so several times, Sandy would raise her hand, "Steve, my control panel's just disappeared." And I look around and there's little John over there, typing away, all happy, or Daniel's all happy and smiling. But they never once in 7 years violated that rule of making it easy to undo if they kind of had fun with you, played tricks on you over the network. So I was proud of them to stick to the rule we had. It was so neat to watch the element of delight every time these kids learned something, that they could go home and show their parents and teach their parents. One of the things I thought about was, what if a computer could be a teacher? In the very earliest days, when my own child was about 4 years old, I visited the Houston School District, and they had these cards that they had developed for the Houston School District that you plug it into your Apple II computer, and it put graphics on the screen, real moving characters as you solved a little problem, like Rocky's boots or whatever. And it would also have voices that would speak to you out of this card, but sound natural. And I discovered that it just intrigued any kid who saw this, wanted to play with it. And it was the fact that the computer seemed more human. It was moving, it was animated, and it had a voice that sounded like human voice. And I've noticed over the years, every time you could get the computer looking a little bit more like a real person, the more it attracted kids to want to do it. And, in education, it's less important what you teach, and much more important that you inspire the kids to want to learn. Okay, that's much more important. If you can make them want to learn, they're going to learn much more than you can teach them with words anyway. Well, I thought, what if you had computers that were so good, they were so human, and knew each kid and his family members, and could ask questions, and knows when he's having trouble to break things up, and say, "You need a little rest right now," and could look at his face even. If you had that good of a computer that was like a human, you could have 30 low-cost computers in a classroom, 30 teachers in a class of 30 students, one teacher per student. And then I realized the modern paradigm of education is a fixed presentation. The teacher presents to everybody in the same manner. That's fixed. Your grade is a variable. You get tested and you get your grade as a variable. What if you went in with a computer that can go at all these different speeds for every student? Every student has their own teacher. Then the student could pick the grade as the fixed element, and the presentation rates, how long you take in math, what level of math you're at, how long you take in history, could be the variable. You could even stay in a class with your own friends, even if you were really technically behind them. But you could pick your grades going in. And I thought, boy, that would be a wonderful paradigm if we can ever get a computer that is as good and human as a real human being is. We haven't gotten there yet, and we're probably far from it. The biggest problem in schools, I worked with the school district, and boy, I'll tell you, the people in my school district, they just did anything they could, any way they could, to get better education done. And one of the problems I felt was it seemed like the teachers were very salary oriented, and they would rather teach 30 kids poorly and get more money than 20 kids, which you could do well, but get less money. And you know, almost anything you do in life kind of boils down to if you have more money, you can do a better job. And the schools are always, all my life, have been kind of like shorted, begging for money, and especially in California, we've had that problem. One year I remember looking at the statistics, and California was 50th in the nation by a long way in class size. In my own experience, when I had 20 kids, I could kind of know where every single kid's head was. And when I had 30, they could drift off and not be paying attention. And class size, I think, was the most important variable. We were 50th in the nation. We were like 47th in computers per children, 43rd in money per child, very low. And a couple of our districts had property tax override elections. In Cupertino, where Apple was, and where I grew up in the school district, I sponsored a bunch of mailings for an election, and they got 63% of the vote. And it failed because Proposition 13 required 2/3 of the vote. And then it failed a second time. And then finally I did it in Los Gatos, and it started passing. And I finally realized that here's the problem. Who's being benefited by schools? They need 2/3 of the vote, but only 1/3 of the families have kids. Who's being benefited are the kids, but the family of 5 gets no more votes than a family of 2. And I think that things would be a lot fairer and more democratic if a family of 5 somehow had 5 votes. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have time for questions right now, but we'll see you at the ribbon cutting at the opening doors for the GTC in 5 minutes.
Yeah, please join us for the ribbon cutting. Steve Wozniak will be down on the conference floor. And again, welcome to the 20th anniversary of GTC. It's great to have you here. Join us tomorrow for our daily close with the New York Times. You'll love this presentation.